The year 2007 is a pivotal moment in Kenya's history, one that changed the nation forever and scarred the lives of millions. The December 2007 election was supposed to be a very democratic process, a celebration for the country's hard-earned peace after decades of political instability. However, for many this turned into a nightmare, one that tore families apart, created a serious community divide, and left the country in the brink of collapse. In this video, I will take you through the tragic events that unfolded and the untold tragic stories of the victims who were caught in the crossfire. Almost 2 decades later, their physical and emotional wounds are still so fresh. And if you would like to know the full details of what happened right from the beginning to the end, then don't go away. Kenya had always been considered a beacon of stability in East Africa. Despite its political history of corruption and violence, the country had managed to hold it together, especially after the peaceful transition of power from President Daniel Arap Moi to Mwai Kibaki in the year 2002. The hope was that this would mark the dawn of a new era, one of the economic prosperity and national unity. But by the year 2007, Kenya was struggling under the weight of economic inequality, tribalism, and political infighting.
And they kill Kikuyu without any problem. That is why we are here demonstrating. We are fighting for our life. Yes, we cannot wait anymore. It's enough. It is enough now.
Enough is enough.
Kibaki, who had been re-elected in 2007 after promising reform, had become the embodiment of a government plagued by corruption, a government that many believed was excluding entire communities from power. For years, the Luo, Luya, and other ethnic groups felt that the Kikuyu community, Kibaki's tribe, was dominating the political and economic landscape. When Kibaki announced his intention to run for re-election in 2007, the atmosphere was already charged. Raila Odinga, a former ally of Kibaki who had fallen out with him, emerged as his main challenger. Odinga, leader of the Orange Democratic Movement (ODM), represented a strong hope for change, particularly among the marginalized community. The tension between the two candidates mirrored the deepening ethnic division, with Kenyans lining up on either side of the political divide. The election was set for December 27, 2007. Millions of Kenyans turned out to vote, hopefully that their voices would be heard.
People have turned up to really choose a leader that's going to take us forward. This is our opportunity. We are expressing our civil rights.
I just hope we get a good leader for our country, because being a dynamic country, we are progressing. We need dynamic leaders.
When the results began to trickle on December 30th, 2007, the first signs of trouble were clear. Raila Odinga's ODM appeared to be making significant gains in areas that were traditionally seen as Kikuyu strongholds. The mood was tense but hopeful until the announcement came. The Electoral Commission of Kenya, ECK, declared Mwai Kibaki the winner with 46% of the votes, while Odinga received 44%. But this was where the trouble began.
9 candidates contested this election. The results conveyed to the Commission by returning officers through the statutory forms, Form 16, the one I was showing you, this form, are as follows. This form are as follows. Honorable Mwai Kibaki, 4,584,721. 4,584,721. Mr. Kukubo Nixon, 5,927. Honorable Kenneth Matiba, 8,046. Honorable Kalonzo, 879.
Many in the opposition believed that the election had been rigged. The figures didn't add up, and the Commission's own system seemed faulty. There were allegations of ballot stuffing, manipulated vote tallies, and widespread electoral fraud. The international community, along with civil society groups, raised alarms. Odinga and his supporters refused to accept the result.
193, 4,352,993. Rajput Nazlin, 8,624. This means Honorable Mwai Kibaki is the winner. The Commission therefore declares Honorable Mwai Kibaki as the President of Kenya.
Fellow Kenyans, we have in the last 2 days witnessed tensions running high in our nation. Kenyans are deeply disturbed and angered by the attempt of this government to steal this election through a process that was fraudulent at every step of the way. The people know that they voted to reject the incumbent and put in place a president and a government they will have faith in. That is why they have elected me as the president. I therefore ask that this current exercise and impasse can only be resolved through a national recount in Nairobi under the full glare of media watching and the involvement of electoral officials. Only such a process will assure Kenyans that this was a credible election. Finally, I wish to appeal to President Mwai Kibaki to acknowledge and respect the will of the people of Kenya and honorably concede defeat.
Protests erupted in Nairobi, Kisumu, Eldoret, and other parts of the country. But what started as peaceful demonstrations soon turned violent. ODM supporters accused the government of stealing their votes and denying them their democratic right. The government, in turn, cracked down on the protest, leading to a deadly standoff. The violence that followed was nothing short of horrifying. It was not just political, it was ethnic. The divide between Kikuyu and non-Kikuyu communities deepened as the crisis escalated. In towns and villages across the country, people were targeted simply for being from the wrong ethnic group. The Rift Valley region became a focal point of the violence. ODM strongholds were attacked by mobs of Kikuyu supporters, while ODM supporters retaliated with equal brutality. The ethnic nature of the violence led to the deaths of more than 1,100 people and the displacement of over 600,000 people from their homes. One of the most chilling moments of the violence was the burning of a church in Eldoret, where hundreds of people had sought refuge from the chaos. The attackers locked the doors, set the building on fire, and watched as people inside were trapped. It was an act of cruelty that shocked the nation and the world. Let's take a moment to listen to the stories of those who lived through this nightmare, like for example, the Kiambaa Church massacre. On January 1st, 2008, a group of Kikuyu people sought refuge in the Kiambaa Church after fleeing violence in their homes. The church was seen as a safe haven for those who were being attacked by rioters and militia groups. A mob of youths from the Kenyan community who were reportedly supporting Raila Odinga opposition party surrounded the church. They set it on fire, trapping the Kikuyu refugees inside. Around 35 people, including women, children, and the elderly, were killed in the blaze. Some victims were burned alive, while others died from smoke inhalation. The church was completely destroyed, and the attackers continued to harass the survivors, preventing many from escaping and adding to the sense of terror and helplessness. The violence in the Rift Valley had its roots in historical land disputes and ethnic tensions. During the election violence, different ethnic groups were pitted against each other, and the violence in Eldoret and its surrounding areas was part of a broader conflict involving Kikuyu, Kalenjin, and other ethnic groups. The Kiambaa Church incident became a symbol of the ethnic violence, as it highlighted the brutality of the attackers on innocent civilians. The killings were attributed to Kalenjin militia groups, but there were also reports that security forces may have failed to intervene or may have been complicit in the violence. The Kiambaa incident remains one of the most tragic and controversial events in the 2007-2008 post-election period, with debates about who was responsible for the attack and how it was handled by the authorities continuing to this day. The Kenya National Commission on Human Rights, KNCHR, and other international bodies, including the ICC, investigated the violence. Some of the people accused of orchestrating or being complicit in the violence, including Raila Odinga's political allies, were later investigated, but the issue of accountability remains a sensitive and unresolved topic in Kenya.
Ni kijana yangu, alikuwa kijana wa miaka 5. Pia hii ni kaburi ya kijana mwingine alikuwa anaitwa Jehia. Pia tuweza kujua jina yake kwa DNA. Na huyu ni bibi yangu, mama watoto. Na sasa huyu anaitwa Ide Mobi Githuku, mimi ndiye Githuku mwenyewe. Tarehe 31 ndio tuamkie tarehe 1. Na tulipoamkia tarehe 1 on Tuesday sasa, na kwa sababu watu walikuwa wamelala nje, watu walikuwa tu wana uchovu nini, na tulikuwa tu tumetulia bila wasiwasi, kwa sababu tulidhania itakujiwa usiku labda, na hakukujwa. Lakini baada ya kama saa 4 saa 5, between saa 4 na saa 5, ndio wavamizi waliweza kuingia wakiwa watu wengi kabisa kutokea kwa mashamba jirani. Wakakuja hivi sasa vile mtu hangeweza kugoja, kwa sababu watu wakiwa wamezidi wezi ngoja. Mtu walijaribu kuponya uhai wake.
Let us look at another victim. His name is Bernard Ndege. He recalls how he lost his 2 wives, 8 kids, and one of the wives was 8 months pregnant. The experience left him with both emotional and physical wounds that reminds him every day when he lost what meant his life due to the violence.
Mimi alienda mwaka wa 78. Nikakaa hapo, na wakati huo wote sisi tulihisi vizuri sana, tukipendana, hakuna Mjaluo, Kikuyu, kabila yoyote. Tarehe 27 Januari 2008 sisi tukaamuka vizuri, alikuwa Jumapili. Tukaamuka mzuri, tukajiandaa vile tukaenda kanisa. Kufika saa 2 hivi polisi akakuja kwa heri ambaye mimi alihisia huko Naivasha. Akasema kwa sababu polisi alisingira Naivasha mzima, wakatawanya wananchi, rudeni kwa nyumba, kwa sababu sisi tumeshachukua jukumu ya kupigana na hawa wajangili. Sisi tukarudi kwa nyumba, hata mimi pia na watu 19 walirudi kwa nyumba. Alipofika kwa nyumba, bibi yangu mkubwa akasema, mimi aliambia nyinyi hapa Naivasha hakuna kitu ambaye inaweza kufanyika, kwa sababu imejaa na polisi. Ikiwa maneno yake yajaishia kwa mdomo, mawe juu ya paa, pap, sisi tukatoka. Mimi na kijana yangu mkubwa akatoka, akakimbilia kwa gate, akafunga gate. Hao wajangili wakakuja, wakachukua mawe 9x9, 4x4, wakagonga hiyo gate yetu mpaka gate akafunguka. Alipofunguka hivyo, basi hawa wakasema, we mzee, leo bahati yako hakuna. Mimi nikalia, akasema, eri tuwachie sisi tutoke, tusike, upeleke polisi. Hawa wakasema, hiyo maneno sisi hatukai nayo. Sisi tukaingia kwa nyumba yangu, alikuwa bedroom. Akafunga hiyo jambia ndani, wale pia wakakuja wakafunga ya nje. Sisi tukaingia kwa bedroom. Hawa wakasinguka huko, wakafunja dirisha ya bedroom. Wakaita mwenzake, we lete petrol. Akamwaga petrol ikiwa sisi tunaona. Sisi tukalia. Wakaita mwenzake, we nani, lete tu kibriti. Akawakisha, akaweka ndani. Nyumba akaanza kuchomeka.
A third victim by the name Joyce Kekimoi, who by then was living in Molo area, a region in the Rift Valley that is mostly dominated by the Kikuyu community, also narrates her ordeal during these times, where she watched her husband being brutally killed. Later, the assailants also ambushed her, pressing her face on red-hot burning charcoal, stabbing her pregnant belly countless times and slitting her neck twice from the sides.
Hayo mwingine akaanzia mzee kukata vidole vyake akiweka kwa meza, wakisipanga wakimwambia hesabu kura mzee ni ngapi. Mzee akaanza kuhesabu kura mpaka akamtolea masikio, wanaweka chini akisema hesabu kura. Akatoa ya miguu, hesabu kura, mpaka akamtoa sehemu zake za siri wakaweka kwa meza. Mzee akaanguka chini, akamkanyanga na miguu na akakata shingo nikiona na macho.
Joyce later states that her 2 children were lucky because that day, when she and her husband were being attacked, the kids had gone out to the neighbor's place, else they would have been killed alone. She watched her husband being killed, chopping off his fingers and toes as they made him count. She cried desperately as she watched helplessly until finally they chopped off his genitals and tossed them on the table. Her husband collapsed and died. After Moi Kibaki was declared the winner, Raila Amolo Odinga and his supporters deeply challenged the results. They had a list of evidence proving that, in fact, the election was rigged. Here is a list of the points that they used to prove that there was a lot of discrepancies, right from the casting of the votes to the tallying process. Number 1. Voter register manipulation. One of the claims was that the voter register was tampered with to either remove opposition supporters or add voters to favor Kibaki. There are reports of multiple voting and the use of names of deceased people to cast ballots. Number 2. Vote tampering and fraudulent tallying. After voting concluded, the National Election Board (ECK), which was responsible for counting votes, was accused of failing to securely transmit election results. It was reported that votes in key constituencies were inflated in favor of Kibaki, and some stations never received accurate results. Election observers and civil society groups reported that the tallying process was not transparent and was marked by discrepancies. Number 3. Intimidation and violence. During the campaign and on election day, there were incidents of violence, particularly in opposition strongholds. Allegations arose that the security forces were complicit in suppressing opposition voters and preventing them from casting their ballots, especially in areas where Raila Odinga had significant support. Then, number 4, we have control of the Electoral Commission. The electoral body, with the chairman being Samuel Kivoito, the ECK, was accused of being biased and controlled by Kibaki's government. It was alleged that key members of the commission were part of the ruling party's political machinery, ensuring the results leaned in Kibaki's favor. Then, number 5, first declaration of results. Kibaki was declared the winner just minutes after the announcement of the final vote tally by the ECK. The swift declaration was widely criticized, as it was seen as an effort to avoid further scrutiny or legal changes. Immediately after the results were announced and Kibaki declared winner, there was a lot of international reaction from many people. Many international observers, including those from Europe Union, criticized the process as flawed and marred by manipulation. The United States and the European Union called for a full investigation into the election results. The international community watched in shock as the violence unfolded. The United Nations and African Union called for peace, while the US, the EU, and other nations urged both sides to negotiate. But with each passing day, the death toll rose and Kenya's future seemed uncertain. Finally, after weeks of bloodshed, Kofi Annan, the former UN Secretary General, was called in to mediate. The violence had already cost too many lives. Annan's efforts were the only hope for peace, but even he knew the damage had been done.
In all successful negotiations, there is give and take. Invariably, some supporters on each side feel that their negotiators gave too much. To those people in Kenya, I would say this: compromise was necessary for the survival of this country. Support this agreement, for it is the key to the unity of Kenya. Today we have reached an important staging post. But the journey is far from over. In fact, it is only beginning. The real challenge now is for President Kibaki and Honorable Raila Odinga to work together to heal and reconcile this nation.
After a tense period of negotiation, the National Accord was assigned in February 28, 2008, and a power-sharing government was formed. Kibaki remained president, and Raila Odinga became the prime minister.
Somebody come to say a prayer. Office of the Prime Minister. Prime Minister, the Honorable Raila Amolo Odinga. Minister, Ibrahim Elmi Mohammed. Deputy Prime Minister and Minister for Trade, the Honorable Uhuru Kenyatta. Minister, the Honorable John Kionga Yes.
While the accord brought a temporary end to the violence, the scars on the Kenyan people remained. The displaced people had nowhere to go. Families continued to mourn their lost loved ones, and the divisions between communities were deepened. The 2007 election crisis left an indelible mark on Kenya's national psyche. The wounds ran deep, not just in terms of the lives lost, but in terms of the trust that had been broken. Many felt betrayed by the government and by the system that had failed them. The economy was shattered and the political system was left weakened. In the years that followed, Kenya has made strides towards reconciliation, but the journey is long and painful. Survivors like Bernard and Joyce continue to rebuild their lives, but for many, the memory of the violence is still fresh. The reconciliation process is ongoing, and while there has been some progress, the emotional scar of the crisis are still felt in many corners of the country. The 2007 Kenyan election crisis was a turning point in the nation's history. It was a period of intense pain, loss, and fear for millions of Kenyans. Yet, it also became a moment for the country to reflect, rebuild, and hope for a better future. As we remember the victims who perished during this dark chapter, we must also recognize the courage of the people who survived. For every life lost, there were countless stories of resilience, hope, and courage. The challenge for Kenya and for everyone across the globe is to make sure that we never forget what we learned from the past. So we must ensure that we are always working towards a peaceful and united future. For Murder Chronicles, my name is Sarah, and thank you so much for tuning in. If you happen to have any idea of a story that you would like our team to cover, then I would request you to write it there on the comment section. In the meantime, thank you so much for tuning in, and please do consider subscribing, and definitely stay safe, and I will be seeing you in the next one.